This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, again, good evening, everyone. So, a little bit about me. I'm the Center Director at Brain Balance of San Diego, and my background in education. And I've been in mostly informal education, but also formal education for over 10 years, working with school districts, parents, families, community partners, and kind of everything in between. And I love doing these workshops because it gives me an opportunity to share with families information that they wouldn't otherwise get to have, and in a unique way. And really, what I love about brain balance and what here was that what we try to do is get to the root of whatever challenge you may be having than looking at symptoms and putting a band-aid on anything. And so tonight we're going to talk about the root causes behind issues with attention and focus. We'll talk about ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and we're also going to talk about what can you do about it, because that's really important too. So again, if you have questions, feel free to tap into the chat box. If I'm going a little too fast, please let me know as well. I know I speak quickly, and I want to make sure I respect your time and get through the program relatively quickly so that you have time to ask questions as well. Okay. So today we'll go over what exactly is attention, make sure we're on the same page, talk about what exactly ADHD is, because just so you know, if you have an issue with attention, it doesn't mean you have ADHD. So we'll talk about both. How exactly is ADHD diagnosed? And I include this because this is a big question that a lot of parents ask. And then I want to talk about what impacts attention, because these are things once you know, you can try to improve. And then how exactly are attention focus related to brain development? How do you improve it, right? And then those tips that you can do at home to help them, especially right now if you are in distance learning or hybrid school model. I have some tips for you. And then what exactly can Brain Balance do to help you too, since we're very unique in the community. Okay, so first thing is, what is attention? According to a couple of these definitions here, attention is the act or power of carefully thinking about things or listening to or watching someone or something. Basically, it's to notice what's going on around you, right? But intentionally, let me make that clear, right? Attention is a purposeful cognitive skill. Attention is primarily a cognitive function that is critical for perception, language, and memory. So something to note is that attention is just not one. I heard my is it okay now? Yeah. Okay. So if you didn't hear what I just said, please feel free to type. My mic, something just went in and out. So just let me know if you missed that. But I'll reiterate a little bit just in case. Attention is not one thing, but, oh, I see Laura saying didn't hear anything. Okay, let me go back for one slide. Okay, so attention is an intentional, purposeful cognitive skill to notice your surrounding, basically. And so it's important to know that it's not one thing in the brain working to help you pay attention. It's many networks and pathways successfully working together to allow you to do this cognitive skill. So in the US, approximately 1 in 5 kids experience some kind of attention and learning challenge. And ADHD alone affects nearly 6 million children. I believe the more recent statistic is about 10% of children are struggling with this disorder. And it is a cognitive disorder. This is not a learning disorder, although it does affect your learning. So what exactly is ADHD? So it's one of the most common, again, neurodevelopmental disorders. It's characterized by developmentally inappropriate levels of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsive behavior. And there's 3 main subtypes. There's hyperactive impulsive, inattentive, or combined of those 3 challenges. In the end, remember, it's an imbalance of the brain. And once you understand that, we can work towards supporting improved attention. So what are some of the common ADHD symptoms, though? I'm sure some of you are on this workshop can identify to many of these areas, symptoms, not necessarily all of them, but maybe for some of you, but daydreaming, forgetting or losing things, they're fidgeting, maybe they talk too much or have poor emotional regulation, maybe they hyper-focus. That's a symptom as well. It's not that they can't focus, but they can't focus when they need to, probably. Poor executive functioning, which is a big umbrella that we're going to go over as well in just a moment. but those are just the skills needed for everyday functioning. So something to also note is that ADHD, so the symptoms are also related with some of these challenges, right? So these are things that you might see, and now this is how it impacts them. It impacts their attention, their focus, time management, organization. So again, the executive functioning skills, planning, follow through. I mentioned emotional regulation and even transitions, right? There you go, executive functioning. And ADHD oftentimes has other challenges associated with it. It's not if you have ADHD, then you must have this other challenge as well, but it's not uncommon because remember, in the end, if ADHD is about imbalance in the brain, these neurodevelopmental issues, then many other challenges that are also due to neural imbalances may arise. So oftentimes we see ODD, operational defiant disorder or conduct disorder. Kids may be depressed. I see a lot of kids that are anxious these days, sometimes bipolar. Sensory integration disorder is definitely a challenge. I see that a lot in the children we see at Brain Balance. Learning disorder, as I mentioned, because it can impact their school days, maybe impairing their speech and even autism. So how exactly is ADHD diagnosed? So this is kind of a little bit of a controversial answer or question, I guess, because the answer is quite varied. And depending on where you go and what your goals are, the assessments will vary. It could be as simple as asking your physician and they ask you a few simple questions and they're like, okay, do you want medication? Or it can be a very lengthy questionnaire or some other method to help assess if your child has ADHD or not. In the end, it is a questionnaire. It's not something you test for, although when you look at brain scans, you can see some abnormalities. Sorry. Okay. I'm hearing yes. So mic is quiet. Can anybody else hear me okay? You can hear me okay right now? Is it loud enough? Can everyone just type in real quick if they can hear me okay? I'm not quite sure what's going on. I haven't had this issue before. Okay, great. I apologize. This time in society with this pandemic, you think technology would be a little bit better, but we're always going to face these challenges, right? So I appreciate you bearing through with me. Please type in and let me know if the sound is off again. Okay, so ADHD again, the way you get a diagnosis for it is, again, a questionnaire, and it's going to vary depending on who you go to and what you're wanting. But ultimately, something to note is it has to be following on the inattention and or hyperactivity and impulsivity. And it also is really important to note that the symptoms that you see in your kid or someone else sees in your child, it has to be in at least 2 or more settings for at least 6 or more months. And it starts before the age of 12. So there are many undiagnosed people with ADHD, and that's fine too, because in the end, when parents ask me about assessments, I just kind of put the question back on them, like, what is the goal of the assessment? What is the, if you want the diagnosis, what is that diagnosis going to help you do? Sometimes you need it for services in school, unfortunately. Other times, maybe you don't want that label following your child, but you still want to get them help. So in the end, think about for yourself, how important is it for you to get a diagnosis? How important is it or not important for you to have that label following your child? And really, in the end, don't be afraid of this diagnosis either, because it can really help liberate you and your child in knowing that, hey, especially for the kids who know they're struggling with managing their own body, if there's a reason behind it, it's not just them, it empowers many kids to acknowledge it and own it, and then find ways to work with it, basically. Not necessarily overcome it, although if we can, we want to try, but there are a lot of benefits to kids who struggle with ADHD too. They tend to be more creative and spontaneous and whatnot. I'm sure you see that in your kiddos too. Okay, so as a review, it needs to have a significant impairment at least 2 settings, and it has to be present usually at home and school is where you normally would see it, at least for 6 months. Oops, let's make sure, okay, that's good. So I talked about earlier, research is really important because by understanding what's going on around the nation and the world, then we can do something about it, right, and see trends. And right now we're seeing a lot of kids being diagnosed, and a lot of the kids tend to be put on medication. The thing is, there's a lot of evidence and even personal experience for some of you right now where medication may not be helping your child. It doesn't work on quite a large fraction of the population. If you are testing medication, then you go through the experimentation phase of what medication works best for your child and then what dose. There is no one magic pill or answer. Every individual is so unique. And what's also unfortunate that comes along with it is the side effects, right? A lot of times it's sleep issues, it has to do, or it suppresses your appetite. So I had a student in our program who literally did not grow for 2 years. And the physician really just brushed it off saying, well, if he's not losing weight and if he's not gaining weight, it's not a big concern to him. But he is literally in the middle of his pre-adolescent, preteen age where he should be sprouting. And so once they made the decision to take him off the medication, he grew and grew and grew. And they wonder now, if he wasn't on that medication, how would he be developmentally today? The good thing is he is appropriate size, strength, almost appropriate strength, but he's working really hard and able to focus a lot better now with some other tools that he learned through us. So let's move on. One other thing that I get asked about is, why does ADHD look different in girls? Every individual is different, and we always say how every child develops differently as well. It's not that girls don't get ADHD or don't get it at the rate that boys do, but perhaps they don't get noticed as much. They fly under the radar because they tend to be, the symptoms tend to be a lot more subtle. But they do daydream a lot, they still struggle with focus, and they still need help. So definitely think about your daughters or your friends. Girls are just as prone to having this disorder as boys. Oh, I wanted to talk about this because we talked about brain connectivity. What does it have to do with the brain? Well, because attention requires all these different areas of the brain working together, we always knew different regions of the brain were responsible for functioning, but a lot of research, especially lately, has continued to confirm it's not just the regions that are essential, but the connectivity. I like to think of the brain like a big highway flowing, in all these different directions with different destinations. And ideally, it's flowing smoothly, right? And you can think about yourself when you're sitting in traffic. If you can think about rush hour in San Diego or even LA or any other areas that get really impacted, it's frustrating, right, in real life. And for a lot of kids who struggle with attention and focus, that's kind of what's happening in their brain. They're trying to get from A to B, but instead they're taking the C. So I'm hearing mic issues again. Interesting. Okay. Let me pause for just 1 sec, and I'm going to try to see if I can switch the headset. So give me 1 sec.
Okay, check, check. Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. Good. Clearer? Awesome. Okay. Thank you all. I apologize again. I'm not sure what's going on. Haven't had this issue before. I've done a lot of presentations, but I'm glad this headset hopefully will hang out with us and be fine. So Again, research showing how brain connectivity, more so than the regions themselves, are responsible for the severity of learning challenges and the severity of these neurodevelopmental disorders. And it, of course, is also connected to a lot of mental health concerns today as well. So we'll get to that more later on. Okay, so in terms of executive functioning, a lot of kids who struggle with attention and focus and ADHD really struggle in these areas when it comes to inhibition and behaving or age appropriately, I should say, managing their emotions, being motivated, organized. And it really stems back to cognitive tasks and cognitive skills like focus and memory and learning and reasoning. And in order to improve executive functioning skills, you have to improve the brain connections that are responsible for that cognition. And so remember, if it's the connectivity that is the issue, you need to improve those pathways. So it's important to understand that because learning is basically a repetition of that pathway, basically. So it's a set pattern of neurons firing that impacts our thoughts and learning. And basically, if you're able to train your brain and to have a strong pathway and efficient, really, a pathway to whatever you're trying to do in your everyday life and functioning, the better, but you have to train your brain. So if you're unable to do that though, and your brain is not working efficiently, then it is hard to learn, to follow along, to be able to ignore distractions, to be able to complete tasks on time, and it affects your relationships. I know it's very stressful for so many of your my families, and I'm sure for some of you in your household, it can be very stressful maybe all the time or maybe when it only has to do with school, but nonetheless it hurts you, right? And it's a time that you want to be loving and patient, but you're very much tested, and so are they. And sometimes their relationships are affected with their peers too because of their impulsivity. Ultimately, the key to their success is synchronizing all these aspects of functioning with their auditory processing, visual processing, being able to block out these distractions, and really, again, bring it all together. So what affects attention? Well, sleep. Sleep is something I always ask parents about. One of the first things, ooh, how much sleep are they getting? And what is the routine? Routine is really important as well. And I did a big presentation on that on Tuesday that I'll share more about later on. But generally, you need to make sure your child gets enough sleep. Kids who are struggling with neurodevelopmental disorders, they also tend to need more sleep than the average child because think about it, their brain is literally working harder than their average peer, right? So one thing I really suggest to families is set a go to sleep alarm. A lot of people think about wake up alarms, but a go to sleep alarm will kind of signal you and signal your child that we need to start the routine to start getting ready for bed so that you can get the right amount of sleep. You all can imagine how cranky you are probably when you don't get enough sleep, and you'll experience that with your own child. So really set them up for success and yourself for success and make sure they get enough sleep. Nutrition is the first or second thing I usually ask too. What are they eating? That's really important because there's so much research and knowledge today about the gut-brain axis, and you need to feed the body in a healthy way if you want them to behave and function in a healthy, full-bodied way, right? So those sugars for sure, if you can cut out added sugars, I'm sure you can see a big difference. And um, processed foods as well. So as part of our program at Brain Balance, we consider this, of course, with our Balance 360 nutrition plan. And we ask that you essentially go on a low inflammation diet so that while you're literally helping to rewire your brain and working in your body, that you're fueling it appropriately. So generally high inflammatory foods would include gluten, dairy, oftentimes corn, soy, and I mentioned those sugars. So if you really want to make a difference and help your child function at their best and pay attention more, there's four things I generally encourage families to think about is appropriate sleep, appropriate nutrition, appropriate exercise, as well as less screen time. But these other factors like stress and worries and their environment is really important too. So are they set up for success? Is there too many distractions around? Do they have the time needed to complete, X, Y, or Z? If they can't follow multi-step directions, are you giving them multi-step directions that they ultimately cannot follow? So those are all important things to consider. So ultimately, something that we really emphasize here is you should, well, I shouldn't say that word. Should is a really complicated word because generally you look at your child, maybe they're 10 years old, and you're like, you should be, behaving better than your sister who's 5, right? But should is a really relative word because if they are ultimately developmentally not functioning at a 10-year-old level, it's fair to place that expectation on them. But first, you have to understand how well they're functioning and where they are with their development, and know that it's not just if they have gaps and holes in their development and deficiencies. It's not across the board generally, although for some it is. Maybe they're really strong and great and age appropriate in some areas of their development, maybe even above age appropriate level uh, for their age. But then there's other areas that I'm sure you realize that they might be struggling as well. That's why you're on this presentation. So ultimately, good development creates good attention. And what that means is we first must develop the function in the brain before we can try to control it, okay? So if you look at this pyramid, this is our developmental pyramid that we work around a lot at Brain Balance. So this is showing you all the components of aspects of training that we do with our students here, from the basis of primitive reflexes to sensory motor skills, your body awareness score, your auditory and visual processing, to ultimately your learning and rhythm and timing. And it's important to have this well-balanced pyramid because that's what allows you to function at your best and at your potential. And we know that the kids who struggle with attention and focus, who are diagnosed with ADHD or not diagnosed with ADHD, struggle in many of these different areas. And ultimately, if they don't have full control of their own body, if they're not functioning like everyone else, of course they're going to be struggling and they're going to need help, right? They're going to need help. So executive functioning and the frontal lobe. Something to note is executive functioning, although it is highly correlated with here, the frontal lobe, which takes the longest to develop, by the way, you still need to train it, right? It's not just something over time that they'll grow into and get better at if they don't have the models and the practice. So although it is related to that region, and yes, we can get that region stronger and it will get better and more developed over time, you still, again, need to train the brain and train those connections. So here's an example of emerging control, right? We want the kids to eventually gain control of their own body and learning and functioning. So when a kid is first starting to learn, they're reading out loud, sounding out letters, touching, the words and just sounding every little thing out. Eventually, they're to the point where they can read on their own. Maybe they're signing out on themselves. Maybe they're following with their finger, or their visual tracking and processing is better. So they rely less on a pointer. And ultimately, as they get older, they're able to self-regulate and read on their own and think on their own and imagine the things that they're reading and pass on that information, process that information, comprehension onward, right? So everything takes steps. Know that too. Everything takes steps, but we have to know where they're at first to support them to get to where you want them to be and where they, quote unquote, should be. So ultimately what we want is a balanced brain. So here's an example of what it looks like when we don't have as many gaps and holes in development, right? And when you do have gaps and holes in development, that the red flags essentially is trouble with learning and making friends, managing your emotions, how much do you have meltdowns and how long does it take you to control them? If you're 10 years old, I shouldn't see the level of meltdowns that a toddler or a 5-year-old would make, right? Or even the type of meltdown as well. It shouldn't be it should be a lot more controlled generally if the brain is developed appropriately, as opposed to a 5-year-old who would kind of just scream out in public without any concern about consequences with peers or whatnot, right? So in this example, here's a very general sense of what it means to be right brain weak versus left brain weak. And just so you know, oftentimes kids who struggle with attention focus tend to be more right brain weak. It doesn't mean that they don't have any strengths in the right brain, and it doesn't mean they don't have any weaknesses in the left, but generally what we try to do at Brain Balance is understand where the weaker area is so that we can stimulate it and grow it and help it get stronger, but by doing that, we help, again, the connections between the different brain regions improve. So other red flags to look out for, if there are truly immaturities with brain development, are missed milestones, persistent primitive reflexes. I showed you that in the pyramid a little bit. I'll tell you right now. It's basically things that you're born with for survival, but by about age 2 or 3, they shouldn't be there anymore. A reflex is something you can't control, right? But we need you to be able, once they're past toddlerhood, they should be able to control their own body. And when they can't, then we know, it's going to affect their learning and their growth and their motor skills. So we look at a lot of different aspects in our assessment because we understand, again, there's so many pieces to the puzzle. It's not just one thing. It's many things, remember, connected together. So how exactly do the brain networks develop then, right? That thing parents ask me a lot, like what happened? It's not something that you necessarily did. Sometimes the brain, goes its own path, but we know that we can improve it. The brain is quite plastic, and there is no too late. I get parents asking me too, is it too late to help them? Not at all. We do, or not we, but brain balance, or a version of brain balance, is done for all ages, from young little ones all the way to folks that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Professional athletes especially do a version of brain balance to help improve those connections and neurons firing appropriately and quickly in order for them to truly function at their best and at their potential. In the beginning, though, and even now, it's primarily developed and stimulated through your senses. So your 5 senses, your touch, your hearing, your smell, your sense of sight, yes, smell, all that's very important, and in movement as well. Your senses and movement are the most powerful triggers for working those neurons in your brain. One neuron that's triggered essentially will have a ripple effect and have thousands of others being triggered. So if you want to improve your brain development, you have to utilize your senses and you have to move. Movement is key. Now, I get a lot of parents asking me, do they really have ADHD, or do they really have an issue because my kid can watch YouTube or play video games for hours? What's going on? They can pay attention, right? If you can identify with this, I empathize with you. What I want to talk to you about next is that there's different types of attention, though, and there's a place and time for that short. Well, let me go into it. Okay, so first there's selective attention, your ability to focus on one activity, ignore other stimuli. We do this quite often, right? Maybe you're in a restaurant and you're having a conversation and you ignore everybody else, right, to focus with the person who's in front of you. For students, maybe focusing on the teacher when there's other distractions like a classmate talking. Divided attention is when you're doing 2 or more activities, aka multitasking, like talking on the phone and doing chores, right? Or the kids are singing a song and playing a game maybe with their sibling while they're exercising or something like that. Sustained attention is very important. This is what I think a lot of us want to teach our kids to have. So you're focusing on one particular activity for an extended period of time, like playing a video game or studying or doing some homework project. Or there's alternating attention. This is the most difficult because you're changing your focus and attention between 2 different tasks. So big example is reading a recipe and preparing a meal. Maybe your kids are following instructions for a project and trying to put some model together or work with their partner, right? Going back and forth, back and forth. So what's the difference between playing video games and studying? Playing video games is a short-term reward-driven attention. So it is different. So video game producers and YouTubers and whatnot, the most successful are pretty good at neurology. They essentially embed systems where your brain is constantly rewarded at a very frequent interval. So say every 30 seconds or so, your brain gets a trigger of a reward, right? When you're doing homework, that's not the case. When you're working, when you're driving, not exactly the case. It's something that you still have to sustain your attention for, but you're not getting that reward so frequently. You have to persevere. The reality is you need both systems. You need a balance of the 2 types of attention to function in the world appropriately. So I'm going to tell you about how to train them for that next, but review. Success with attention requires a lot of things coming together. It's the brain connections, again, that drive all these functions. And when the brain networks are not on track development, there is an impact. And you see that with their focus and attention. So the good news, I mentioned, the brain can change. We can work on it. So Cambridge did a really unique study that was published earlier this year where they showed how brain connectivity related to struggles with attention, learning behavior, mental health were related back to how it can improve is improving the brain connectivity. And brain balance, we do work with Cambridge Brain Sciences, by the way, but that was a separate study. But what we learned was 12 different cognitive tasks that we're assessing, including attention, inhibition, various types of memory, and reasoning. When the kids go through our program and exercise their brain and build those brain connections, 11 of the 12 cognitive tasks have a statistically statistically significant improvement. So it means you can change the brain, right? In our program like ours, you can change the brain. Even Harvard, actually, we work with the Harvard McLean Hospital, and they showed that kids who did just a portion of our program, it wasn't even the full program, they showed improvement in brain connectivity, long-term success actually, and those connections, rather than as effective, I should say, as kids who are on medication. So I'm saying rather than taking medication, ours is an alternative because oftentimes when you go the medical route, it's just medication, but not every family wants to go that way. And what medication does is simply put a Band-Aid and an artificial connection for the brain, as long as it's A, the right connection, right, and B, on the correct dose, and then C, usually has symptom or side effects that come along with it. So you can change the brain. And more research has shown how when you exercise in general, it definitely helps process information faster than someone who does not engage in exercise. So I want to teach you that next. One other thing, we talked about mental health earlier, and I think this is really important to know. And this research just came out this year too, where nearly all the kids that went through our program had a 40 to 50% improvement in mental health. And I can personally testify that this is true for the kids that come through our program. And how could they not, right? As they're training their brain and improving the brain connectivity, not only are they seeing their own successes in the program, there's so many opportunities to see that improvement as they level up with over 30 plus exercises. They're literally building these connections that help them be successful outside the center. So at school or with their friends or in sports or dance or playing an instrument, I hear over and over and over how they're doing better at home and in school and in the community. And I call it a positive snowball effect. You know, as you're improving that activity, you really truly the sky's the limit, essentially, right? You're not held back right now wanting to be better or wanting to control your body and not being able to. We teach you how to do that and through these exercises here. So brain balance, I showed you that pyramid earlier where the different types of development we look at. And so core is important, different types of balance. That's a huge thing you can work on with your kids. Balance is a big indicator of disconnections in the brain, especially one-legged balance with your eyes closed. Can they balance even two legs with their eyes closed on an uneven surface even, right? We need balance between gross and fine motor skills. We need you to be able to function your auditory processing as good as your visual processing. Something to know, a lot of kids who struggle with attention and focus, I think I said this already though, visual processing tends to be pretty low, and there's many different components of visual processing. So training them with that, and primitive reflexes we talked about. At home, have your kids engage their muscles. So at school, when they are going to school at least, typically they have a chance to run around on the playground in the morning before they have to go into the classroom, right? Right now it's a little bit different, but if you're at home, then give them the opportunity still. Don't go straight from having breakfast at the kitchen table to moving the breakfast plate and replacing it with a laptop and never getting up. Get your kids to run around a little bit and really elevate their heart rate, especially in the morning before they get started with school. That's going to get their juices flowing, literally, to get them to be able to focus. We want to take frequent brain breaks. And when you take a break, it doesn't always have to be this 5, 10, 15-minute break. It literally can be a 1-minute brain break. I talked a lot about structure and brain breaks Tuesday night. That presentation, by the way, was recorded, and you can see it on our YouTube page. So if you're looking for brain break tips, check that out or message me later on, and I can send you the presentation slides for that too. And then one big thing is counter screen time with movement. If the kids, if this is assuming that they weren't just on the computer all day, right? If they're in school, but if the kids want to watch a 30-minute show or play a 30-minute game, make them run around for 30 minutes before and after, actually. That'd be really great, or break it up, whatnot, right? Right now, because they are spending so much time on the computer all day, and there is such a thing as screen fatigue. I literally last Saturday got a big headache being on my phone for too long while I was researching for some trips. And so it is important to take a break from the screen and move that body, move that brain, and let your brain and body reset, essentially. So remember, move your body as much as you can, elevate that heart rate, balance screen time with movement. Really pay attention to nutrition. What you eat matters, especially kids with ADHD. They need a lot of protein, so make sure they get protein in them. And there's a lot of different types of protein. So keep to low inflammatory foods and ensure they have a healthy, balanced meal every day. Sleep, I talked about, is important. So creating healthy sleeping patterns and having that routine. Training the brain. So I talked about earlier with the sustained non-reward driven activities. It's not exactly quote unquote fun usually, but it can be because the activities include puzzles, board games. Baking is one big one where you can't enjoy that baked good until it's done in the oven, right? An hour later or so. So baking is another way to train them. Taking bike rides, right? Getting to a destination, reading, right? You don't get that reward until the end of a chapter, the end of the book. Chores, yes, homework, but there's ways to train your child and train yourself to engage in these sustained non-driven reward activities as opposed to video games or movies. Last one is schedule, right? Again, routine is really essential. Yes, it's going to take a lot more work on your end initially, but the goal is to have some consistency and training them to build up their executive functioning skills so that you don't have to micromanage. I am sure you don't want to do that for your child for the rest of their lives or even for the next year possibly. So train them to have these skills that they need to be independent and successful. But it is going to take time and it's going to take consistency. And if you want more tips on that, please feel free to reach out as well. Some additional distance learning tips. So I mentioned plan ahead. One thing a lot of parents I'm finding are struggling with is they just don't know what's going on with their kid every day. They just, okay, go to your class, right? But again, it's going to take work on your part initially because you need to know their schedule. You need to know what they're supposed to learn each day, what the homeworks are supposed to be, and really talk to the teacher if that's the case. If you're a little lost, the teacher needs to have that lesson plan planned out well in advance. They're not winging it either. At least they're not supposed to be. You know, principals to require them to show them, you know, what they plan to do usually months in advance. So plan ahead, work with the teacher, work with your student, share that schedule with your child and really set those expectations each morning and each day rather than being reactive, right? I want you to be proactive. Establishing a morning, midday, and evening routine. A lot of times we have kind of a morning routine, right? You wake up, maybe you brush your teeth, you eat breakfast, and then you need to be on the computer by 8 o'clock. But what about the midday routine, right? When are they taking their breaks? When are they eating their lunch? And then after school, what does that look like? When are they supposed to do their homework? When do they get free time? And then in the evening, when are they going to eat dinner or exercise? And when are they supposed to start getting ready for bed? So make sure you have that routine set. And it's going to take time to build, of course, and it will change as well, right? You have to be flexible and you have to teach your child to be flexible. But if you have a pretty consistent routine, it really helps the household run smoother. Really consider your setting, you know, wherever they're learning, what is going on around them? Are there distractions? Are there beepers? Are there other kiddos around, like their siblings? Are they hearing their other siblings' class? Do they have headphones? Can they handle putting on headphones, right? If they're a fidgeter, you can't just say stop fidgeting. They literally can't, right? They need some accommodation. So what kind of accommodations are you able to provide them? Flexible seating can be one of those options. I definitely don't like sitting all day. I'm literally standing right now. Standing engages the body and the core in a different way. And so give your child that option too. Maybe they even want to lay on their belly at times, and that works a lot of core as well. But if they're going to sit, think about ergonomics. We talk about that word a lot, at least we used to with adults, but kids it's the same. When they're sitting whatever table or desk, is it the appropriate height? Is their head looking too far down or looking too far up at their screen? When they're typing, are their elbows too elevated, right? And their wrists are too elevated? Or is it 90 degrees where it's supposed to be? Maybe they need some cushions under their seat to prop them up, or maybe you need some books or boxes to put their laptop higher and you get keyboard to type with. I've done that before. So something to think about there. And then your kiddos need kinesthetic opportunities to learn. So reading out loud, moving their body, having multi-sensory opportunities, and maybe again, talking to the teacher. Most kids learn best in a multimodal way, but it's not always the case, right? It does take work on the teacher's part. So if you can talk to the teacher about that too, or if you can supplement with multi-sensory experiences, that's key. Taking appropriate breaks. So I didn't talk about this yet. So appropriate breaks is key, because it's not just taking frequent breaks, it's making sure that they're doing the breaks they normally would. So at school, when they are going between periods or taking a recess break, they're literally running around playing and chatting with their friends, right? At home, it shouldn't be any different. They should not be on the computer on YouTube or watching a TV or playing a video game in that, break that they're getting between classes, even if it's 15 minutes. Make sure they get out and they're moving. If they're generally chatting with their friends, give them a little bit of time to chat with their friends, texting or FaceTime or whatever it may be, but make sure they're going and moving their body like they normally would. And then the last thing I want to make sure you do is self-care, right? We always talk about oxygen mask on you first before you try to help someone else. So make sure you're taking care of yourself, making sure you're eating healthy meals and planning ahead to ensure that that can be the case, and not just defaulting to whatever is around. Making sure you stay hydrated, even for your kids too, by the way, and make sure you take your breaks. I'm definitely the biggest hypocrite for that, but I do try to take breaks. I try to get up and take those quick movement breaks frequently, but I probably don't take enough long breaks like I should. And then mindfulness. A lot of research showing how meditation and mindfulness and just kind of centering yourself really helps reset your system. And then I have a few more additional strategies depending on what type of issue your child has, whether it's inattention, impulsivity, or hyperactivity. I'll let you read through it because there's a lot of overlap there. But ultimately, whatever you try to do with your kids, empathize with them. Know that they truly are not functioning like everyone else. They are literally working harder than their sibling probably, and than their peer, and then you, to process the world around them and be able to function at a level you expect them to function, all right? So these strategies, whatever you want to implement, keep it simple, make sure you're intentional, and make sure you're consistent. Consistency, I cannot say enough, and accountability, really. Make sure you're accountable and they're accountable for the expectations that you set, and making sure they understand why you're doing what you're doing or expecting what you're expecting of them. Because generally, motivation with kids, if they're not motivated, generally there's a reason. Maybe they don't get the purpose, maybe they don't have the skills for whatever is expected of them or whatnot. So keep it simple, intentional, consistent. Accountability again is key, and make sure they understand their purpose. Oh, positive reinforcement. I haven't talked about this, but this is really important. When you want to train anyone or anything on any behavior that you want to see, positive reinforcement is key. So take the time to praise your child for every little, even if it seems so silly, give them that praise, because I'm not hearing it enough, right? Praise them for all the things that are going well. Don't dwell too much on the things that aren't. In the end, as they build themselves into, little adults, they're going to keep in mind the things that you praise them for and that you want to see. And maybe it seems like it's going through one ear and out the other, but unless you can reinforce these positive behaviors, it's never going to happen, right? So positive reinforcement is really, really important. Think about earning rewards too versus punishing and taking away things that they like. Okay, so a lot of times I get asked, is this normal for my kid's age? You hear all these things, but you just don't know, and that's okay. That's why other providers like me are around, because we want to be able to help you, right? You can only know so much, and you don't know what you don't know, right? Same with me. So maybe an assessment is key. Our assessment, I'm going to talk a little bit about brain balance now. We are very, very comprehensive. We're very different than other providers because we give you a full holistic picture of what's happening with your child. We don't just look at the symptoms. Again, we look at everything, the whole developmental pyramid here. And again, with primitive reflexes, this is something a lot of people don't even know about or don't even test for. And generally, it makes sense because that's not something you have to even talk about once you're past, again, toddlerhood. But we know with the kids that are struggling with attention and with coordination, they to have one or more primitive reflexes, and that's something we can work on to inhibit. But we want to look at all those sensory motor skills. Are they working as they should with your fine and gross motor skills, your olfactory system, your visual system, your auditory system, your tactile system? Do you have good body awareness? Something called proprioception is your internal GPS and how you relate to the world around you and gravity. And if you have poor proprioception and poor equilibrium, it how can you expect your child to have empathy and relate to you or to their friends if they don't even literally feel themselves, right? So something to consider there. We talked about visual processing, and then ultimately, is their rhythm and timing appropriate? Are they able to pull all these stimuli around them and make it work appropriately? So we look at it all. Our assessment is typically $195 for being part of or signing up for this presentation. We do have a special for you for $145 if you book an assessment by tomorrow. We'll follow up with you then, but it is no obligation afterwards. I do assessments for a lot of families just to get them answers because again, who else has gave you all these pieces? So Brain Balance is a program that's been around for over a decade now. We've worked with over 40,000 kids, specifically designed to strengthen and build these brand new, not brand new, well, it's actually, yes, a lot of brand new connections in the brain through a combination of physical, sensory, and cognitive activities. So very unique in, again, the approach. It's a lot of physical movement. It's a lot of fun. I always tell kids and tell families, we're non-clinical. We're not doctor's office. We're not a tutoring center where you have to sit and stare at a computer for a couple more hours after having done that all day at school. So almost every single one of my kids, I would say 99% of my kids, have a lot of fun here. And we have really close relationships with them because it's such a personalized program. Our program is a 1-to-1 ratio right now with our students. Before, if it wasn't the pandemic, it would be a 2-to-1, but never more. It's not a group setting because everything has to be personalized to them. And we look at, again, the entire picture. We look at the development, we work on coaching with the parents, we look at nutrition, and I work with others so that we can truly build a strong foundation for your child to thrive, okay? So if you're interested in learning more, please stay in touch with us. And in general, we have a lot of resources available to you. And I want to, really invite you to Disc Life After Brain Balance because we see such amazing changes with kids who thought they couldn't, or even families who thought they couldn't be that best version of themselves. There's so many families who've come to me where I ask them, how often do you have good days versus bad? And so many of them can't remember the last time they had a good day, or they know it's few and far between. And that breaks my heart. I want you to have these smiles. These are real pictures of kids who are thriving now because of someone taking the time to understand them as a whole and working on them specifically and supporting them in this whole, big unit to thrive. So kids who really struggled making friends now have friends. Kids who couldn't ride a bike. I have 2 teenagers actually this summer. One is a 16-year-old boy and one was a 13-year-old girl who learned how to ride a bike. And the 16-year-old boy thought he would never learn. He thought he was too old. But after doing Brain Balance, boom, his body was able to coordinate in a way that allowed him to do that. And that same boy is learning how to drive now, something he didn't think, and his own family didn't think he would, really be able to do because there was some visual processing and cognition skills that just weren't in place yet. So doing well in school, of course. I had a child reading scores and math scores go through the roof after Brain Balance. Sensory processing skills, bedwetting, focus, executive functioning skills. We serve a lot of different challenges because we're able to look again at the root of the issue with the brain development. So stay connected with us. If you want to learn more, you can call and schedule a free consultation or an in-center assessment. Again, there's a special that we're offering you. You can contact us by calling or texting our office or emailing us, whichever is easiest. We're flexible. If you are hearing this presentation and you're like, hey, someone else can benefit from this, we'd love a referral and let them know. We'll give them a special as well. And there's some other reading material to learn more. So Disconnected Kids and Reconnected Kids is written by Dr. Robert Melillo. He is a co-founder of Brain Balance, but it helps you really understand much more of what I just give you an intro of with the neurological disorders and brain development and brain connectivity. And then Spark is really great because that book tells you so much of how movement really plays into development. So another great resource for you if you're interested. And then please stay in touch with us on social media. If you haven't liked us or followed us, join us on Facebook and Instagram. And then if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, there's a lot of these recorded webinars and other resources available to you. So you can always check there if you miss a workshop. But if you sign up, even if you can't make it, we generally do a recording and can email it to you too. And as I mentioned on our website, there's webinars and blogs as well, a lot of different blogs. So check it out. And if you're looking for something in particular, let me know too, and I can send you specific resources. I do want to share one upcoming event I'm having, and it's in person. Dr. Kevin Johnson with Center for Health and Human Potential and I will be doing a joint presentation on neurodevelopmental disorders in November. So if this is you're interested in or know someone that would be interested in, please go ahead and RSVP. It is very limited seating, as you can imagine. So please help us spread the word, because we know a lot of families need help. Pandemic or not, they need help, and we're here to support them. So thank you, everyone. This last page, I do have some references if you are interested, but again, more so resources, they're embedded in the presentation. You can email me as well. But I want to give you all a chance to ask some personal questions and make sure you get everything that you wanted to get out of here. Okay, and I'm glad this mic worked out. Thank you, everyone. So we are non-medical. Someone was asking about payment and insurance. Being non-medical, we work directly with insurance companies, although I can share that some families do utilize their FSA accounts, maybe HSA accounts. So I'm happy to provide you an invoice or a document, stating what the assessment or the program does. And I know there's just alternatives out there, so it doesn't hurt to reach out and see what's going on. This type of program will become much more and more common. I do get families and other sources trying to figure out how they can implement a program like this and get it paid for, because it works, right? And it's a lot cheaper than the medical route sometimes. And for something that you're struggling with for years and years and years, if not their entire lives, can really be improved in literally a matter of months. And it's because of the basis of what we do and not having those negative side effects that come along with it. I get a lot of families that come here having gone through the medical route and done different Ps and interventions and really had little success or very slow improvement until they came here. And a lot of times once they come here, some of them don't need those types of services afterwards, and other times they still need a little bit more support, and they're much more effective after getting that foundation built up with us. So I got a question of how is a child screened for visual processing and for dyslexia? So it depends on where you go, right? But for visual processing, there's a few different ways. There's manual ways that sometimes practitioners will test. But something to know, and I can do a whole presentation on visual processing. Actually, it's very fascinating. There's a lot of different reflexes in your eyes, and there's so many components to visual processing that I can't quite answer in this, Q&A. But know that there are ways to test, but you have to know what you're looking for. And there's sometimes very small subtleties, like a child is supposed to be looking at an object and controlling their body, but they're doing it for a sec, and then you'll see them blink. That means their brain was not able and their eyes weren't able to sustain that effort when they should have been able to, right? So sometimes there's some manual ways that folks assess for that. We do it through a proprietary program, but it's standardized. So our whole assessment is not something, oh, Brain Balance thinks this. Like, no, everything we do is matched to the national standards, so it is appropriate. So we do it that way. And then in terms of dyslexia, I don't diagnosed for dyslexia. I don't, as a non-medical program, we don't diagnose for any disorder, but we can tell you a lot behind what you're seeing and help you explain what you're seeing. So things like dyslexia, I did a lot of presentations on that this last month. So please check our YouTube channel for more information. Dyslexia literally is disconnections in the brain, literally brain imbalances where if you look at the brain scan of someone with dyslexia versus not, someone with dyslexia has significantly less areas of their brain working. And then it's not that they can't read, right? It's just their brain is going a really roundabout, I like to say scenic route way of getting to that information. And so there are many providers out in San Diego that I'm happy to connect you with if you're looking for that diagnosis. About a third of the kids I would say in our program have dyslexia and come out of here reading a lot more efficiently and fluently and with more confidence, because again, we get to the basis of what's going on with the brain connection. And then what I recommend after a program, if they're not where parents want them to be yet, to now go forth and find, you know, these very specialized programs. And you do need a specialized program for helping with dyslexia. Tutoring is not good enough, honestly. It's not intentional enough. They need a specially trained program and trained person to help them kind of take it to that next level. But first, they need the foundation. So there are many of these programs that are supposed to help, but again, they don't have that brain foundation for that other intervention to support them, then it's slow going. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, please let me know. But dyslexia, I think, is a fascinating topic, and I'm happy to talk more about it if anybody is interested. What else? What else is going on with you all? And you can send a private message too, I believe, if it's not something you want to put out. Tonight was a lot more of what's going on, the whys, and a handful of tips. If you would like more tips that you can implement right away, again, please check out my talk on Tuesday. It's called The ADHD Child, Creating Structures, Motivation, and Body Breaks. And I have some other topics on our YouTube channel that can help you too. Great question. How long does an assessment take? So depending on how old your child is, it can take anywhere from about an hour, hour and a half to an hour and a half to 2 hours. Most of the time, it's going to be about an hour and a half to 2 hours because we go through a ton of exercises. The good thing is, because it's such an active activity, the kids have fun and it goes by really, really fast. So we look at everything on that pyramid as well as we do a cognitive exam as well through Cambridge Brain Sciences. And so if they're, I guess, like 5 or 6 and under, they don't have to do as many cognitive tests, so it's quicker. But for the basically 7 and up, it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how focused they are and how many breaks they need. But it does go by very quickly. Again, I'll tell you, 99% of our kids walk out of here having fun and wanting to come back. So it's nice seeing their smiles when they come in, because I'm not quite sure what to expect. But what I tell parents is tell them they're going to come play and they're going to show off their muscles, and we're going to help find out where they're really strong and where we can help them to be stronger, basically. And the cost is typically $195, but for all of you, you have a special if you're able to book an assessment by tomorrow, or schedule one, not do it by tomorrow, but schedule one by tomorrow for $145. All right, any other questions or tips that you would like to have? We still have time. I'm glad that I finished appropriately. Usually I talk way too much. So if there's a little bit more specific tips you would like, I'm happy to share it with you now, since we do have the time. But if you're good, again, thank you for coming and joining and spending your evening with us. I hope you were able to take something out of it. And whatever question you may have moving forward, please don't hesitate to reach out. Give us a call or email or text again, and we'll be following up with you tomorrow as well. You'll probably hear from Kenny, our coordinator, our center coordinator. Yeah, you can call our center, or we can call you. You can also feel free to text us if there's a good time to chat. All right, everyone. Well, have a great evening. I hope you survive the heat, this lovely October weather. Oh, Halloween, we have a candy buyback. So Halloween is going to look a lot different this year, I'm sure, but candy generally is part of the tradition. We have obviously don't encourage candy. There's a lot of healthier ways and allergy-friendly ways to celebrate the occasion. So check out our website, brainbalancesandiego.com, and click under events to see what the candy buyback event is about. It's called the Teal Pumpkin Project 2, where we're giving away toys and allergy-friendly goodies instead of all that added artificial sugar and dyes. All right. But I hope you have a great holiday and hopefully it continues to do well or do better in school and give us a call. If not, we're here to help you. Have a good night, everyone.